Hello friends, my name is Marines, and today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favorite romances that I read because of BookTube. This was a really interesting topic to think about because at this point there are so many things that I read because of BookTube. I think back to my time as a reader before joining this community when mostly I was picking up things by wandering through the library or wandering through the bookstore and just seeing what caught my eye. But these days I'm mostly finding things through word of mouth because of BookTube and BookTwitter. So it's a little bit difficult to really pinpoint the things that I got from here and where exactly they came from. But I've managed to come up with a list of romances that I know for sure like I was put onto because of BookTube. First up, I have the Ravenswood series by Talia Hibbert. Now, I had actually read one of Talia Hibbert's self-published books before this, and then her Brown Sisters series got really popular on BookTube, but I heard Riley Marie specifically talking about the Ravenswood series and how much she enjoyed it. So I was like, okay, I have to go back and read those. And I did read all three of the related books in that series, and I think these are my favorite of what Talia Hibbert has written that I've read so far. This series is about a small town called Ravenswood, and we follow three Black women who are living in this small town who are kind of shunned or ostracized for different reasons. In the first book, A Girl Like Her, we follow Ruth, who is a little bit isolated because of her autism, because of her kind of geeky interest, and because she's involved in something of a scandal in this small town. In the second book, we follow her sister Hannah, who was also involved in that scandal, and it has limited her job opportunities within that town. And in the third book, we follow their new friend Ray, who's being gossiped about because she's new to town and she's a recent divorcee. I loved all of the dynamics and how each of the main characters really felt like fully fleshed out characters. I loved how specific each of their personalities seemed and just how Hibbert manages to represent like a vast array of people, plus all of the chemistry between our main characters and their love interest was A+, and it was just a really good and fun time. Next, I have Go Deep by Rilzy Adams, and I cannot pinpoint exactly who put me onto this, but I know that when this came out last summer, I believe, it just caught on through BookTube. I heard it from multiple sources that this was just a very well done and steamy novella, and I thought so myself as well. Go Deep follows the main character Navaya. She is a romance writer who is having a hard time getting inspiration because her own love life has been a little bit dry, and so to kind of get back on the horse, she enlists the help of her best friend. So this is a friends to lovers romance, and like I said, it is short and steamy, but I think the thing that impressed me so much about this is how much punch that Rilzy Adams manages to pack in this really short novella. It felt like I got to know the characters. It felt like I was going to miss them after I was done reading this, and it truly was one of like the spiciest and steamiest things that I've ever read in such a small package. Next, I have Highland Treasure by Lynsay Sands, and I heard about the series multiple times from Mara at Books Like Whoa, so she is always talking about how well done these books are. I'm somebody who does enjoy historical romance, but I've never been big into like Highland romances, but the way she talked about these really got me excited to try them. So I actually started with the most recent one, which was Highland Treasure, and I enjoyed it so much that I went back to the beginning and I'm reading them now in chronological order. So I've read the last one and the first one. I thought that this was just such a fun book. It managed to balance the romance aspect of the story with the outside plot things and the adventure so well, and even though it is almost an immediate like marriage of convenience, you get the chemistry between these two characters so quickly, and I loved both of them. Alysanne was just so brave and wonderful and strong, and every time she did something I was like rooting for her. I was also thinking it could never be me, but good for you because she was just so great about like doing what needed to be done. And then you have Rory, who he's got this like soft healer side, but he's also like fiercely protective, and all of his like men are very, very loyal to him, just like Alysanne's people are very loyal to her. her. So when they came together, it was easy to root for both of them together. And then the additional plot things, like the thing that they were trying to do together, the bad people they were trying to escape, that just really kept it moving very, very quickly. Next, I have Rebel by Beverly Jenkins, and this is the first book in the Women Who Dare series. So I was familiar with Beverly Jenkins, like even before really diving into the romance community here on BookTube, but I never felt pulled to pick up her romances. I just was familiar with the name, but not so much with her work until I got into this community and everybody was like, you need to read Beverly Jenkins. So I started here, and I think that this was a phenomenal place to start and to get introduced with her work. Rebel is set in Reconstruction era New Orleans, and Valinda Lacey is a school teacher who comes from the North to help educate freed slaves in the South. When she arrives, she is engaged to her childhood friend, and she's kind of like, marriage doesn't need to be about love. But then she meets Drake Levesque, who is the well-off son of a Creole family in New Orleans. I loved the rich setting of this novel, and usually when I'm in historical romances, we're talking about like Victorian era historical romances. So to see something set in the Reconstruction era in the United States, in New Orleans, it was just such a wonderful backdrop, and then the characters themselves were vibrant. Next, I have A Lie for a Lie by Helena Hunting, and this one's a little bit different because I had just heard Helena Hunting like hyped on BookTube, mostly for her book Meet Cute, which I have read and also enjoyed. But after I did enjoy that, I was looking into Helena Hunting at like her backlist, and I was a little wary because I'm not big on sports romances always, and she had a lot of hockey romances, but I decided to give it a try just because BookTube had introduced me to her as an author, and I read A Lie for a Lie, and I was so surprised at how much I loved it. It was not at all what I was expecting, and I think that can kind of be, it's billed almost as a second chance romance, and it is that, but it does have another trope that is a little bit spoilery, so I can see why some people would be like put off by that kind of twist, but I was enamored because it was not a twist that I typically reach for, but I thought it was handled so well. I thought that the sports aspect of it was handled well as well, and I love that the main male love interest was like all the way in for pursuing the main character, Lainey, and the steady progression of their relationship was just so sweet and so wonderful. I think this especially lives like highly in my feelings because I was taken so by surprise, and I have since gone back and I'm making my way through like a bunch of her hockey romances, which I think are just, like I said, a ton of fun. Next, I have Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade, which was all over BookTube when it came out. It was not a book that I was especially inclined to reach for because I actually love books that have stories within stories or that focus on some area of the arts, like if it has authors or actors or dancers or anything like that, that is like, I love it. But in this particular story, we're really focusing on an actor who is writing fan fiction and sort of a friend that he makes that also writes fan fiction, and they know each other online anonymously, but they have occasion to meet in person as themselves, as the actor and, a fan of the show. And he figures out that she's like the person that he knows as a fan fiction writer, but she doesn't know right away. So this has two things that I'm not like a huge fan of, and one that is like, some sort of like hidden identity trope. And then also fan fiction in writing is not something that I gravitate towards because I'm not a big fan fiction writer. But seeing everybody talk about how much they enjoyed this on BookTube convinced me to give it a chance, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that it was very interesting, especially in like post Game of Thrones world where it tackles this idea of like, using fan fiction and fan spaces to fix things that the writers didn't necessarily get right, and the sort of like investment and disappointment that you can feel when a work doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go. So all of those things were really well done, and I think that the handling of that like, misinformation or him not being upfront about who he really is was also handled really well and sensitively. And I believe the progression of like how that happened, how it came out, and the characters' reactions to all of that information as well. And finally, I have one that isn't as recent a read for me, but I had to include it on here because almost immediately when I joined BookTube, the romance side of BookTube, I started hearing about Mariana Zapata, especially about her as being sort of the slow burn queen. So I was like, okay, let's try this out. And my goodness, I am so glad that I did. The first book that I ever read by Mariana Zapata was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, and that remains my favorite of hers. I'm not sure if it's always going to be my favorite because it was my first, but this is about a football player named Aiden and his assistant Vanessa, and he is very like gruff and almost standoffish, and she is not enjoying her job, and she also has like dreams of starting her own business. So she finally commits to it, to quitting her job, and when she does, like Aiden realizes how much he depends on her and he needs her, so he wants to get her back as his assistant, and that whole thing kind of morphs into what becomes a marriage of convenience. And I love this. This is definitely slow burn, so we're talking about hundreds of pages before they even like kiss or anything like that, but I thought it was so sweet. I really love seeing the change in Aiden's behavior, and it really was bordering on where I was like, can I root for this main character, because he was really gruff. But as you see and understand like why he is the way he is, how regimented he is, the kind of shyness but also like single-mindedness that makes up his personality, you start to understand him more. And then as you see him shift his behavior and like hear the feedback of what Vanessa is saying, like you can't do this, and him take that and change. It was just so beautiful, so heartwarming. I loved them together as a couple, and yes, all of the tropes that this handled were just right up my alley and incredibly well done. That's it for me today. I would love to hear from you guys down in the comments about your favorite books that BookTube put you onto, especially if they were books that you probably wouldn't have reached for yourself but were convinced to try thanks to BookTube. If you are enjoying this content, don't forget to subscribe. All of their social media information will be down in the description, as well as my own. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.